New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
Hey everybody, Tracy Brown here. I am so glad to welcome you to this week's episode of the Inclusive Church, right here on the New Thought Media Network. And every week we come together and recommit to building and maintaining New Thought spiritual communities that are inclusive in ways that help to teach the values and principles that we learn and teach and practice, and also do that in a way that is inclusive of all kinds of people, all of God's people, all of the ways that God shows up. And my name is Tracy Brown. I'm the author of the book, Stained Glass Spirit, Creating a Spiritual Community Where Oneness Does Not Require Sameness, and a few other books. And I am glad to welcome you. If you are willing to be public, then I invite you to say hello in the chat or in the comment section, depending on which platform you're on. I see we have some folks on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on YouTube. So please, please, please feel free to say hello. And as I go through the next 35 minutes, feel free to add your comments in the chat or in the comments, because I will see them and I may bring them forward, or especially if it's a question, I'll do my best to answer it. So today, switching the spotlight without changing the mindset. Every now and then I get on a little bit of a rant, and today is likely to be one of those, but I'm gonna try to not just rant about it. I'm gonna try to talk about it in a way that's helpful. So this title, Switching the Spotlight Without Changing the Mindset, refers to what happens way too frequently, where a minister or a group of leaders is really committed, they feel really committed to being inclusive. And so they begin to intentionally spotlight people or groups that may have been ignored or overlooked before, but they haven't changed their mindset to a truly inclusive mindset. So they still make their decisions and they celebrate and congratulate themselves, but they're still operating from a mindset that is based in a binary way or binary focus, or a focus on political power being attached to one specific group or not. So, okay, what am I talking about? So, let me give you some examples. So, one example in this calendar year, there are 3 different communities or leadership groups that have come to me, or that I've been working with, and in all 3 of them, there was a true heartfelt commitment to inclusion and to shift from the focus in the past being on one specific group. And when they switch their actions, which I applaud them, I applaud everybody who goes beyond just lip service, and they actually try to integrate it into what they're doing and how they behave and what policies they set up. I love that. However, the actions taken have got to be in alignment with this commitment to be inclusive of all or many people. So, in all 3 cases, the focus for change was not all diversity and all inclusion. The focus for change was race. And all 3 communities were predominantly white or Caucasian. And in the past, not intentionally, not from any place of ill will, but it was just what showed up, right? That everybody on the platform would almost always be white, or when they would do their annual awards recognition, the people they knew most, or the people who were most popular, or the people who were most known were white. And so it would not be unusual that, all of the awards would go to people who are white. And in the intention to be more inclusive, in all 3 cases, there was a decision, a conscious decision made. We're going to be more inclusive. And then all or almost all of the people who were on the platform or who were invited to speak as guests, or musicians invited, or people recognized for awards, then just kind of all of a sudden they were all or almost all Black. Okay, so what's wrong with that? I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm saying be careful of what you're doing when you're being intentional. So, if you are talking about inclusion as including all people based on race, gender identity, sexual orientation, different age groups, people who have different professions, different backgrounds, in theory, you could still have everyone on the platform be white, and you could be demonstrating inclusion if you were intentionally including people from different age groups or different backgrounds, or who brought something different than the norm. And so you also cannot necessarily be demonstrating inclusion by saying, oh, everybody we're going to invite or everyone we're going to reward is Black. Because then now you're saying the criteria for the award or the recognition is race based, when the default was race based before. Now, I think it's really interesting that the 3 communities that I ended up being involved with, I was really happy that I was able to have some input. And all 3 were slightly different situations, but the overall issue is the same. So, with one of them, the challenge was they had made a decision, and they had decided we are only going to feature Black people, and we are going to make sure all of our awards go to people who are Black, with one exception. There was someone who was Hispanic in that group, and they called me because they didn't understand why they were getting so much negative backlash. They had people telling them it was reverse racism. They had people complaining that two of the people they had given recognition to were not qualified for the recognition based on all the criteria that had been used for years before that. And it appeared to a number of people that their only qualification was that they were Black. So they were getting a lot of backlash. And so my job became in working with them to, one, help them understand why they were getting the backlash, because they were very confused about that. They were so proud of doing what they thought was a good thing, but they had lost some of that in the way they executed it and the way they talked about it, because so much of what they talked about was, isn't this great? Everybody who received an award this year is Black. And we haven't done that before. So, pat us on the back. And it really offended a lot of people, again, because two of the people who received recognition had not actually met the previous standard that had been used in the past. In terms of people on the platform, they had some guest musical artists and they had some guest speakers. And one of those speakers was not very good. And so people respected them, but they didn't feel like they got a spiritual message. And until the feedback that the leadership was getting was, yeah, you just put that person out there because they're Black, and we didn't get anything out of it except we could say we had X number of Black speakers this year. So that was one situation, and it turned into a mess. And then after I helped them understand why they were getting that feedback, then we spent 6 months repairing relationships and then also shifting the strategy and how they talked about it. And so I'm pretty confident that in 2026 they will have some different feedback instead of backlash. And we also had the conversation about, if you're going to talk about inclusion, that's different than anti-racism work, right? And so anti-racism work might be one part of your overall inclusion strategy. But if you're saying we're being inclusive, then you have to demonstrate that on more than one spectrum, more than one dimension. If you're only going to focus on race, then talk about an initiative that is about race. And so, anyway, so that was one. The second example, they actually called me in before they had announced anything at all, and that was really great. And the leadership group, there were 6 people in leadership around this topic of inclusion and being an inclusive church. And that team of 6, they were conflicted about some of the things that they were talking about. Some people were really gung-ho, and some people were like, no, I don't think that's right. So I got to work with them while they were still working as a team, but they had not announced programs and activities to the community. And in this case also, they were only talking about race. And so, one of the things that really stood out for me in working with them over 3 different sessions or conversations was that they kept saying things like, this was a group that was fully committed to the term the global majority when talking about people who are not white. And while that is statistically true, when I asked them, well, why are you using that term? And it all boiled down to, well, we want to prove that there are more people who, well, they actually, what they told me, we want to prove and get people to understand there are more minorities in the global population than people who are white. Now, just think about that for a minute. There are more minorities than people who are white, so that would make them not the minority in the global population. They would be the majority in the global population. So we had a great conversation about, oh, that mindset hasn't shifted. You're still working from a false assumption that white people are the norm. And also, you're planning everything you're doing around race. And, but you're saying we're inclusive. And so, how are you explaining to people that you define inclusion as all kinds of people, but the only thing in your strategy or in your tactic plan is specifically about race, and your language is grounded in race? The other thing that came up about that was they hadn't shifted their mindset that inclusion means everyone and that everyone's input is important. And the reason, one of the reasons that that showed up to me was when they were talking about this language of the global majority. They were like, the global majority, so they should have more power. And so we had this wonderful conversation about, so is the old mindset that if you're white, you have power, and if you're not white, you don't. So now we want to make sure that a whole identity group has all the power. Or, and they were like, no, 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 we want everybody to share power and we want everybody to have input. I'm like, so, but you're talking about the reason you want to use the global majority terminology is to indicate that people of color should have power, and they won't unless we call them the global majority. So switch the spotlight, but if you don't change the mindset or the paradigm, you're going to keep creating brick walls, or you're going to keep running into brick walls and barriers. And I don't want you to do that. So I said there were 3 communities that I've had the opportunity to engage with on this year. And the third community, they were a church that had made some decisions and to this church's credit, they were focused on more than just race, which was a really good thing and quite refreshing. But they were still operating from a place of the people who are not white in our community are the ones we need to fix, or we need to fix the community for this other group. And so they were giving mixed messages. So to their credit, they had already been doing things over a period of years to really demonstrate affirming and valuing the LGBTQ plus community. And they had also done some things already that were intergenerational. There was still some siloing happening with people from different age groups, but they had at least done some programming to have some conversation about bridging the gap, bringing in younger adults, and the young adults and middle age adults that they had done some things with the oldest generation in the church, and had some cross-pollination in terms of classes, in terms of sharing with each other. And they had done a pretty good job from the platform in messages over the previous 2 years related to Pride Month and LGBTQ plus people who are in the community, spotlighting them, and so they had laid a good foundation. But what was happening was that as they were beginning to be more intentional around race, then they began to not apply the same standard of integration, of cross fertilization. And they were in the process of planning 4 different programs, one per quarter. And the first quarter was going to be a program for everybody to learn about Black people and Black history. And in the second quarter, it was going to be a program for everybody to sign up and learn about Latino culture and the Latino community, like outside of the church, but in their city. And in quarter 3, they were going to do a similar program around people of Asian descent, communities of Asian descent. And part of me is not mad at them, because that was an interesting approach. But where there was a little bit of a slip was when I asked the question, so tell me what this has to do with your spiritual principles that you teach, and how does this content help? Because right now it's just looking like it's a history lesson, and history's not bad if that's what you're intending to do. But how is learning that history or that cultural information going to help build a stronger church? How's it going to help people in your church engage with one another better? How is it going to help people understand each other better? And what does it have to do with what your church teaches and values? And they couldn't answer any of those questions. And so part of the thing, again, switch the spotlight, but change the mindset. So it's not just information. The mindset is we are here to teach and demonstrate certain spiritual values and principles. And so how does learning this information help us do that? Now, I'm really excited to say, after working with them, they still are going to do those 4 programs. And what they're doing differently is then they are building in conversations and discussions among the participants about how does this information help me understand people who are from this racial or ethnic category, that things I didn't know before. How does this affect how I work with someone on a ministry team who may come from this background? And most importantly, every one of them now contains some pieces around cultural communication related, the impact of culture on communication styles, with some practice of actually communicating or interpreting communication from different cultural lenses. And none of that was in the initial design. So took out some of the history and put in some of the things that really will impact their ministry teams, the volunteers, the staff, and how they work together, and how that results in the church itself being more inclusive and being more comfortable being inclusive of many different kinds of people, in this case, as it relates to the impact or the effect of race and ethnicity. This works because, as I said, they've got 2.5, almost now 3 years of doing some very visible things around the LGBTQ plus community, including some really, really great work around understanding and accommodating people who are transgender in a way that is inclusive within their community. And they've already done some really, really effective dialogues and engagements around other aspects of diversity. So, so I, I'm trying very hard not to just rant, but it is a rant. When you say that you're committed to inclusion, but you're only looking at one category, that's a challenge because you're teaching people that inclusion only means one thing. And that's especially problematic if that one topic is race. Number two, the challenge with shifting from all of one group to all of another group is that you're actually inviting criticism because you are saying, well, before it was all this, well, now race becomes a conscious category, not just one of many elements that is considered in the selection of people to be on your platform, the selection of people to receive recognition, the selection of people to serve in different ways within your community. So prior or earlier or past efforts that may have been unintentionally unwelcoming or unintentionally exclusive, now it becomes really intentional, and you just are going to confuse people at best and offend people more likely. So, what else do I want to say about this in the next 5 or 6 minutes? I simply want to encourage you in your spiritual community to watch for the red flags. Watch for the red flags that, in our efforts, we're still using the idea that it's binary. You're either this, or we're going to feature this group or this group, versus understanding when we say we are building inclusive churches, we are trying to tap into all the ways that people are different from one another and use those differences for the benefit of our ministry. We are not doing this from a political, what's the phrase that I dislike so much I can't think of it right now? Being politically correct. Yeah, it's like I don't like the phrase, so I have to think to bring it forward because that's what it will look like to your congregation. We're just being politically correct. We need to show some black people on the platform, or we need to prove that we see black people, so they're the ones who we're going to recognize this time. And it's a fine line, because if it's been unintentional exclusion in the past and now you're really focusing on it, you probably will find people who were overlooked in the past. Either they are really, have something to contribute to the music team, or they have something that they should be recognized for, and they've done 10 times more than maybe 7 or 8 people you recognized in the past. So absolutely, it's correct and good to recognize them now. But even if there is only one person who doesn't meet the standard that has been used to recognize or to feature people in the past, if you only one, one, can undermine all of the good that you are intending to communicate or demonstrate. Because at that moment, it appears that race or sexual orientation or age is the only criteria that got them the recognition or the featured spot on your platform. And as soon as that happens, it will take you years to regain credibility. And third, I would suggest that you be very careful about bragging about your choices and what you are doing that is related to inclusion. It's kind of like sometimes you'll hear people say, well, you can't call yourself an ally to a group that you're not a part of. If they call you that because they see your actions and appreciate them, great, that's beautiful. But to name oneself as an ally, you may or may not be having the impact that you choose. So when leaders in our churches, they are announcing some big change, and they're doing it in a way that says, look what we're doing. We're doing something really unique or really valuable, and you ought to appreciate us for that. And it's like they're patting themselves on the back and telling you should applaud them as well. That is a disaster waiting to happen. If it's related to race, it would make you or the leaders doing that appear to be operating out of a mindset that I am white and I'm going to save this or fix this. And so I'm still putting myself in a superior position. If I'm straight or heterosexual and I'm doing that with some initiative or initiatives that are featuring or highlighting the LGBTQ plus community or members of that community, then again, it's like I'm patting myself on the back and seeking your applause, when in reality, only the members of that group can say whether the action is meaningful. You want your congregation to be saying what is effective, what is good, what they are excited about. And you don't want it to be personal to you, the leader. Because let's go back to basics. If everything you're doing is in the context of building the ministry and demonstrating the spiritual principles that you teach, then there's not a lot of room in there to take personal credit. I just am pausing because we have a lot of leaders in our communities who make it about them and not about the ministry or the spiritual principles. So, okay, thank you for coming to my unofficial TEDx talk. I think this actually would be a great talk at some point. I'm going to think about that. But please, if you're going to switch the spotlight, be sure you also change your mindset in how you approach it, how you announce it, how you activate it. And that's all I've got for you today on the Inclusive Church. My name is Tracy Brown. I am just so delighted that you joined me today. And I'll see you again next Tuesday at noon Mountain Time, right here on the New Thought Media Network.
Thanks for watching The Inclusive Church with Tracy Brown. Join us again next week at 12 noon Mountain Time.
On behalf of everyone at New Thought Media Network, thank you for being a member of our virtual family. Your financial contributions help share the New Thought message with people from around the world. Please visit and contribute at www.ntmedia.org/donate. New Thought Media Network. Come be you. And please like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, peace and blessings.